Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast. I'm your co-host, Neil Trivedi.
Hello, everyone. I'm your co-host, Renee O'Day. We want to give you a very warm welcome to our latest episode.
Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time as we talk to guests who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all of which take you one step closer to that feeling of hope.
It's our pleasure to welcome a man who found his own path to recovery from a variety of anxiety disorders in that journey. He created a website called anxietypath.com. Today we welcome Mr. Michael Valentine. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Oh, thank
Welcome
you for
to the
having me.
show.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted you on for a long time, as you know. And finally, we were able to arrange it. And we're thrilled to have you. So
Wow.
you got that going for you.
Great.
Actually, just full stop. I met Michael on Twitter because I was looking for help for an anxiety disorder dealing with, my daughter. And he was amazing. So just so everybody knows that, if you need help, this is the man. So Michael, some of your conditions started at a very early age of 5. Can you tell us about those conditions that you've suffered with at that young age? Because that seems awful young.
Yeah.
But I guess not so much in this day and age, right?
Well, a lot of kids do suffer with anxiety, but it mostly goes undiagnosed. My earliest memory of having a panic attack was 5 years of age. And obviously I didn't know what it was at the time. And the way that it manifested itself was in outrage. People, whether it be my teachers or family members when I was younger, they knew something was wrong with me, but they had no idea what. They couldn't diagnose it. They had no sense of what was wrong with me. And oftentimes, I was referred to as the special child. And, my mother was, it was suggested to her several times that I see a therapist, and I did. On and off throughout my childhood, I did see therapists who never diagnosed me properly, who never understood it. And it really went undiagnosed into my early 20s. But so the earliest panic attack that I can remember very clearly was at 5 years of age. And
do you remember what triggered it?
I don't remember the exact sequence prior to that. Oftentimes,
were you in school?
No, I was home.
Okay.
Oftentimes, it when I was younger, it was this feeling of being abandoned or a feeling of being alone. And actually, that particular time, it was the first time that I can remember, it was feeling alone. And it was a manifestation of panic because I felt alone. And so it was, I guess that would be the trigger then in that situation. But what led up to that, I don't remember specifically.
Okay. And you were just 5, and then they continued?
Wow.
Well, they did continue on and off. So let me make it clear, I did have a happy childhood. But with that being said, I was happy and most content in familiar places with familiar people. The minute I left my own house or my own property, or I was with other people that I didn't know, class trips were a huge trigger. That sort of thing where I really felt more alone. Even though I was with people, I never felt comfortable. So growing up, everything was tainted with fear, as life is when you have an anxiety disorder. or many manifestations of such. And it wasn't until I actually turned 16 when I first started driving that I realized that I was a phobic. I became a driving phobic. The first time I drove alone was I had a panic attack. And yeah, I still, I mean, I always drove, but I would only drive on certain roads, certain areas. It was a very controlled, in my head, very controlled. So yeah.
Familiarity.
So, yeah, and you said one thing I found interesting. You said that doctors didn't diagnose you properly until much later. Do you think was that just a sign of the times and not enough information they had, or was it them not doing their jobs the best that they could?
Well, I think it was a combination. First of all, I didn't know how to express what I was feeling. I didn't know how to communicate what I was feeling. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that doctors, therapists, it's very difficult to understand anxiety unless you've had anxiety. And that's something that even as an adult, when I was an agoraphobic, and I was seeing a psychiatrist, he did not understand me at all. And in hindsight, it's amazing to me that the level of lack of understanding that goes on in the medical community, and it's nobody's fault, because if you don't have it, if you've never experienced panic, there's no way you could ever understand,
Yeah.
So I don't blame any of the doctors, therapists for not diagnosing me properly or even understanding me. They were very limited in what they could do, but everybody tried their best to help me, but it just wasn't,
So could you talk a little bit about, going to school and how you dealt with that?
Well, going to school, it was, so that's where my social anxiety really started and really took off. I kept as with all anxiety at all stages of our lives, what we do is we try to control our environment. So control, the people that we associate with, where we sit in a classroom. Certainly, certain teachers were more comforting than others. There was plenty of times where I skipped school. It was very when there was if my anxiety was very high, I would just stay home. And you learn very quickly at a young age how to fake an earache, and my throat hurts kind of thing, and these are things that I did just to stay home. And it was detrimental to my learning experience, to say the least. I mean, I did suffer from missing class and not participating. Especially in my younger years. As I got older, I did a better job at managing it, even though in many ways my anxiety became more pronounced. Once I started driving and I was having panic while driving, then I realized what a phobia was. And that's when I started learning what a phobia was. And so that it started to really escalate in my later teen years.
And at this point, you were not on medication?
No, okay. I did not take medication. When I was 22 years of age is when I became a housebound agoraphobic. So, and that's when I got on medication. That was my first time and only time on medication. It was a horrible experience, partially because of the sign of the times. The medications were not as advanced as they are now. The understanding of medication was not as it is now. And my doctor, as I mentioned earlier, had no clue what an anxiety disorder was or how to deal with it, how to treat it, or anything else along those lines. So
was this when you went to school with the dinosaurs? Because,
pretty much.
It's like
a lot of dinosaurs. I think the wheel was invented.
the wheel. Oh, okay. Was there a Starbucks yet? Because
No.
that was the most important thing. No. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light of that. So the medications were not up to par, and you had a really difficult time with them.
A very difficult time.
Like what kind of side effects did you have?
It wasn't so much side effects as they only made my anxiety worse. And the reason I believe this is so is because when we depend with anxiety disorders, when we depend on help from outside of ourselves, we become dependent on something. And when they don't work the way we hope they will, that raises our anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm hoping is going to save me isn't saving me. It makes me panic more. It put me in a severe depression. It was a horrible cycle. But I do tell a story. The lowest point of my life, the lowest point of my journey with anxiety disorders was during this time when I was taking medication and I was seeing this doctor. And the absolute lowest moment of my life was sitting in the doctor's office and not feeling understood. And the reason why I wasn't understood, he gave me, and I don't even remember the names of the medication. I never knew them. I never will. But one of them was a medication I was allowed to take as needed whenever I was having a panic attack. And at the time, my panic disorder was off the charts, totally unpredictable. So I literally carried in my hand a pill all day, all night. In the event that I were to have a panic attack, I had it readily available. I could just take it very quickly. And so what would happen is when I carried that pill, you could imagine it melted in my hand. Right?
I was going to say, was it in a baggie at least?
No, it was literally in my hand, and
it was sweat. Yeah,
and it would melt, right? So then I'd go wash my hand and go another pill, and I would repeat the cycle. So
I'd be licking my hand. Sorry.
The last time I saw the doctor, my psychiatrist, I said to him, I said, I need another refill of these pills. And he said, why are you taking so many of them? And I said, well, I'm not. I said, they're melting in my hand. I said, and I wash my hand, then I go get another one. I said, I'm holding it in my hand. And he looked at me with this confused look on his face, and he asked, why are you holding it in your hand? And honestly, at that moment, that was the lowest moment of my life when I realized that the one man who I was counting on to save me had no clue to the extent of my suffering. He had no idea. And that was the last time I saw him. I did wean myself off the medications under the guidance of another doctor, which you know, but I never went back to the psychiatrist, and I never took medication after that. I said, there has to be another way. And that was one thing. And Neil, I love what you said during your opening. You said, in your podcast, you want to bring people to one step closer to hope. And that, to me, is the most beautiful line, because it was hope that saw me through my own journey. And I didn't have it many times. Many times I was bankrupt emotionally. But for some reason, I always had hope that I didn't have to live that with suffering. I always had this feeling of hope that there was something, and you saying that really, resonated with me. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Sure. Neil gets all the good lines. We actually have a joke about that. No, I'm teasing. Because what do I always say? Neil, what do I always say? There's always hope.
That, yes.
Oh, and get
breathe.
me a chai latte. No,
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
both those things. They both give hope.
There's
right?
always
Even
hope.
the latte
There's
does.
always
Yeah,
hope. I
there
know,
is.
right?
And I'm sure another time that you needed it, you mentioned that that was a very, very bad time for you during that the phase with the medication. And another thing is that you were married quite young, right? And that also, I know, came with its own share of turmoil. So I'm sure, did that just add to the whole thing? Like, here's one more thing to, like, bring you down and cause you more distress, right?
Well,
Was that a factor as well?
so I got married when I was 20 years of age. My firstborn was born when I was 22, the year that I became a housebound agoraphobic. I lost
Right.
my job. I lost my apartment. As a man is concerned, in terms of my ego, for not being able to provide for my family, not being able to afford to buy diapers for my newborn child. I mean, it was, I sunk into a severe depression.
Of course.
Literally spent most of my days curled up on a couch, with the lights off, TV off, in a dark room, curled up on a couch. That's where I felt most safe, just lying there. And it was really a very hopeless time. I mean, there was, and being married and having a child, I don't think they exaggerated my issues or made it worse. I think the pressure I put on myself to be a provider, to be a good father, to be a good husband, those things I put on myself. And knowing that I couldn't be the person I wanted to be, that was detrimental to me. It had nothing really to do with them, as much as the pressures that we all put on ourselves every day. I believe most people do. We have expectations of what we're supposed to be and do. And for me at that time, and knowing that I couldn't live up to my own expectations, it was a very hard time for me.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
But getting through that, actually my son, I credit him, my firstborn, my son, I credit him for giving me an excuse to work on my agoraphobia, in that every day, after the medication and that fiasco, when I was sitting home now with no plan, no job, no plan, and no doctor, no idea what was going to happen next. But I knew I couldn't live on the couch. I knew I couldn't live inside my four walls. So I literally started to step outside every day. I literally started going outside every day for a minute or two, right on the front step, that kind of just out the front door. And little by little, I would take another step. And I knew I had to be able to get away from the house. And I started to use my child as an excuse to take him for a walk. And I would put him in a carriage. I'd make this whole big scene, put him in the carriage and go 10 feet, and then turn back. But he was my excuse, my reason to push, to get outside and to do this. And little by little, what I was actually doing, that I learned years later when I learned what the process is of creating recovery, is I was desensitized to my trigger outside. So it was really, something that I started doing very informally on my own. It wasn't until years later that I actually learned recovery, that I was able to go back and really practice and understand what the process is.
Well,
Right.
you also suffer from, I know, bridge phobia. What is that called? Driving phobia? But
Driving
you have a
phobia,
phobia of bridges,
yes,
correct?
correct. So, um,
Living in the New York area, that has to be like a hard thing to deal with.
there are bridges everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
You
Some
sure,
couldn't
right?
live in Kansas, could you? You just couldn't live in
Yeah.
Kansas.
The funny thing is, in my late 20s, I actually visited Kansas.
No way.
And
Wow.
a friend of mine from high
I
school,
just pulled that out of my.
yeah, mine from high school in the Air Force, and he was stationed out
Mhm.
in, and we drove through a section of Kansas. I went out to visit him for a weekend. And this was my late 20s, so I had started my recovery, and this was um, one of my maiden voyages, on a plane to go visit somebody. And I saw how flat it was. And when I came
Mhm.
back with my counselor, I said, I'm going to move to Kansas. And she said, why? I said, well, there's no bridges out there. I said, flat. It's flat. I think it's flat. The interesting thing about this is that I really seriously considered it. Not that I ever would do it, but we can't move away from our fears. See, my fear is not necessarily the bridges as much as they are my insecurities of dealing with the bridges. So even if I did move to a flat area, I'm going to find something else to be afraid of. My insecurities and my fears come with me, and that was the lesson that I actually learned about that. But yeah, so when I was 16, I'm sorry to get off topic there, but when I was 16, I learned.
No, this is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
yeah, no, yeah. But you know what? Like, you're correct. Anxiety will manifest into something else. And it could have manifested into a fear of cows. And
Mhm.
then, I mean, it really could have. Like, you
Yeah.
never know what's gonna happen or trigger you or whatever. So from there, from your 20s, being married, 2 kids,
Mhm.
starting to take walks, can you go on from there and let us know what
Sure.
happened?
So,
Because I know the story.
so when I was 27, I was actually having to drive over a bridge, and we went away for a weekend. I remember my wife at the time, who's now my ex-wife, and my 2 children. We went away for a weekend, and driving back, it was a Sunday afternoon, and it was like a 5-hour drive back. And somebody said, "Oh, there's going to be traffic on the bridge." Sunday nights, traffic on the bridge. For 5 hours, I had high levels of anxiety driving all the way down to that bridge. And it was torturous. It was suffering. I, I was stopping at every rest stop. I was stopping every chance I had to try to, catch my breath, to resettle, to whatever, to make it home. The ride was tedious. It was literally torture. The interesting part about that drive is when I got to the bridge, there was no traffic, and all my anxiety left.
Wow.
So I drove
Really?
That
4.5
was,
to 5 hours, yes, driving to the
Wow.
bridge, high levels of anxiety because of the bridge. And when I got to the bridge, I had no anxiety. I drove over that bridge with zero anxiety. That's when I knew I had a problem. That's when I said, I have to find help. I cannot go on.
okay.
So that was a Sunday night. Monday morning, I opened up for anybody of the dinosaur age. They'll remember Yellow Pages. I opened up the Yellow Pages, and Google. And I was looking around for anxiety, I don't even remember what I was searching for. And there was a full page ad for a local hospital which had a treatment center specific for anxiety disorders and depression.
Wow.
And I called them, and I joined. They had workshops and support groups, and I joined a workshop, which at the time was a 9-week workshop. And that's where I met my counselor, and that's where I first learned about recovery.
Wow.
I always say I feel blessed because this treatment center was literally 15 minutes from my house. I didn't need a highway to get there. There was no bridges. I could literally drive myself to this treatment center. And it was life-saving. I mean, honestly, the meeting my counselor and learning this whole process. I mean, I'm a social phobic, and I'm able to be here tonight talking to you. I don't even know how to quantify my recovery in terms of, how I drive.
Someone give me a dictionary. Michael used a big word.
Quantify. I may not have used it. I don't know.
You did correctly, yes. I know. But what I want to ask you is, to me, that was the universe putting, what you needed right in your lap. And so you go in there and you become a counselor.
Well, yes, years later. So what happened was, initially, and a good part of the story is that at first I didn't take to the program.
Oh, really?
I thought I needed something very strong. I felt like I needed a brain transplant. I did not think that I was capable of recovery. I hoped. I knew, but
Wow.
I was in such a bad state, emotional, that I did not believe I could recover. So the first 9 weeks, or when I was in the workshop for the 9 weeks, the first 9 weeks that I met my counselor, I followed along and I had some relief. The thing that really affected me during those 9 weeks was just having my counselor relate to me. Somebody knew how I felt. That in itself was a profound experience. So after the 9 weeks, it was a little better. I had but I wasn't nearly recovered. So what I did ultimately was I hired my counselor to work with me on a weekly basis after the workshop ended. And I would meet with her once a week for an hour. And, she would pick
That's
a spot
amazing.
where I had to drive to her. She gave me work on how to get to her near a bridge. So I had to drive near a bridge. And I mean, honestly, sometimes we talked in a car. I mean, it wasn't a conventional session that we would think that her counseling. But I met with her every week, but I also didn't necessarily follow what she was teaching me because I didn't take to the program so quick. So I would with her once a week, but I would also keep researching other things. So acupuncture, tarot card reading.
I cannot picture you. I cannot picture you doing tarot cards.
Listen, I did. It promised me relief. Any snake oil on a street corner, I would buy it. I tried.
Really? This is amazing.
But nothing worked. And finally, one night I met with my counselor, and I showed up, and I was physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. I was spent. I had nothing left in me. And do it anymore. My depression was coming back full steam. My anxiety, my panic disorder was off the hook again. I couldn't live like that. And I met her, and she looked at me, and she could see it on my face. And she said, "Are you ready now to start recovery?" And I said, "Yes."
Oh.
Wow.
Do, and I'll do. And that was the night that I truly started the road to recovery. And I was probably, so I met her when I was 27. So that was probably when I was early, to the following year, probably 6 to 8 months after that I originally met her, that I actually started the process.
Right.
Fast forward
Wow.
later, I took my recovery and I ran with it. Once I started seeing benefits, and I said, I want to see how far I could take this. And I've taken it to a place where I would never dream that recovery could even be like this.
Right.
So I went back and became certified. I always kept in touch with my counselor. I always say she saved my life. I love her. I'm in debt to her forever. So I've kept in touch with her. And I told her, I said, I want to become a counselor. I want to help others. So then I was hired by the hospital, and I started running the workshops. And after excelling at that and them seeing how hands-on I was, they gave me my own support group to run, a weekly support.
Wow.
Ran that. And that's really the basis as to why I have the website today, is because I wanted to bring what I did in person at the treatment center, put it online so I can reach many more people. I think recovery needs to be accessible to everyone.
Everybody.
Affordable price. I mean, it's got to be available. And
especially right now.
Yeah,
right.
So I said earlier, I felt very blessed to be near the treatment center, that I can get there.
Mm-hmm.
People around this country, there's not many, and especially back when I first started, which is 12, 13, 14 years ago now, there were literally only 3 treatment centers in the country just 13, 14 years ago. So that leaves a lot of territory that there's not availability. And that, because I know there's people suffering, and especially now, with the COVID situation, we are in very trying times. And this is all a huge trigger for people with anxiety. And it always hurt me to think people were out there without proper help.
Right.
So that's why I started the website.
Well, Michael, Neil also suffers, but he suffers more in the depression side of.
More on that side of it, but
Do you also do recovery for that, or is it just the same?
Well, I don't do recovery for depression so much. And Rini, you remember the 3 pillars of suffering? You have depression, and you have anger, and the 3 are all.
Shut up! No, I'm kidding.
But
anger. Never mind.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Got it.
So the 3 actually are intertwined, interconnected, and they all share a common base, a foundation of control. So anxiety is to control the future, depression is to control the past, and anger is trying to control the present moment. So if we look at it from just the point of control, how can we accept the way things are right now without controlling anything? And that's ultimately the goal, but it can be extremely difficult to get to.
Wow.
Could you go into a little bit of what your program is?
Sure. So the program is essentially behavior modification. And behavior modification, so anxiety disorders as a whole, and when I say anxiety disorders, that's an umbrella term, okay? So what's under
Sure.
umbrella is everything from agoraphobia, any type of specific phobia, whether it's elevators, driving, public speaking, airplanes, escalators, you name it. It's a phobia is a phobia. Panic disorders, night terrors, OCD, PTSD. These are all things that fall under the umbrella of an anxiety disorder, but it's also a response to a situation of that has sparked fear within us. Okay, so anxiety is, every person has anxiety. Anxiety itself is not a bad thing. Anxiety has allowed us as a species to evolve through the years, from the dinosaur age to come to this point in time. It allows us to assess danger and to respond to it. So to do that, it uses the fight or flight mechanism. Okay, so the fight or flight is essentially when we have a panic attack, that's our body releasing adrenaline. That's our body, our natural self-defense system, which is anxiety, screaming to respond. Problem is, when we have a panic attack, there's nothing to respond to. So that's very scary for people, because I could be driving my car and my natural self-defense system, which is anxiety, screams, run, get out of here now, danger. Well, there is no danger, but yet I feel danger. I'm trying to get out of there. And that's where the frustration comes in, and that's where the irrational fears come out. Okay, because there is no danger, but we're responding to a danger alert. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here, trying to explain this.
No, we want you to. We want you to, please.
Yeah, we want that. Yeah.
Because, it's important to know, when I say behavior modification, all anxiety disorders are really just a conditioning. It's a conditioned response that our bodies have learned subconsciously to help prevent us from entering into a dangerous situation. Even so, mine started at a very young age. Why did it start? We could sit here for days trying to figure it out, and who knows.
A lot of it is genetic, right?
It's not. There's a lot of debate about this, and I've talked to many experts. I've read many articles, studies. There is no conclusive evidence that it is genetic or not genetic. There's a middle ground, a middle understanding that the genetic component to anxiety disorders is more of a personality trait. We are born, some people are born more empathetic, more sensitive, more, I don't want to use the word fragile, because that may imply that we're broken in some way, which we're not. But we're very sensitive. So so we need that personality trait, and then we need a life experience to set off the conditioned response of fear or danger to a specific situation. So for a child like myself, yes, I was born with a certain personality trait. I had an experience, whether that experience was, getting punished, by a parent, or With PTSD, I know people who had no anxiety before a car accident. They have a car accident, and all of a sudden they're driving. PTSD, that is, like instant anxiety disorders in many cases. And in other times, it's a real long-term conditioning. I've worked with people where, they grew up and certain traditions in their household or turned into rituals with OCD. And they didn't even realize what was happening until they moved out, and they can't stop now. And they're afraid if something bad is going to happen. So that in that case, it's a very long-term conditioning. So how we get to where we get to, there's many different avenues, many different trails, but it's some sort of conditioning, a conditioned response to a threat of danger. So my program is behavior modification to reprogram our anxiety and to reprogram our intellect not to respond to the anxiety.
Okay.
I still have a thought today. I can have a thought.
Oh, well, let me write that down. Michael has a thought.
Well, just thought, a triggering thought.
I know.
But the question is, whether or not I respond to it. So recovery is, do I respond to my trigger thought or not? And if I don't respond, well, then I still suffer from anxiety disorders. My recovery is not solidified. But if I can look at my anxiety, look at that thought and say, I'm not going to listen to it right now. I'm not going to respond. It goes away. And that's my recovery. So that's it.
And how long has the website been up?
The website has been a nightmare in itself. It took me over 2.5 years to put it together.
Wow.
So
that is amazing.
But I wouldn't give up. I ran into all kinds and passion. I wasn't giving up on. And with every obstacle I hit, I had to overcome it, and I just kept going. So it's been up now for about a year, and it's amazing. Love to hear the stories, the people, the members that join, and they're creating recovery. They're doing it, and besides the website, they have access to me. I talk to them on the phone. We do text messaging, email, phone calls, whatever it takes. What it's like to be hopeless. Once I give them a sense of hope, they run, and
there's that word again, hope.
Yeah, and I love that word.
I love that word. It really is.
Me too. Yeah. And speaking of hope, what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe in a similar position to where you were, years ago before you went on your path to recovery, and hasn't seen that ray of hope yet? What would you tell them?
My catchphrases are never give up and persistence. And I meet people, and then listen, I meet people who don't follow me, who don't, not everybody is going to take every bit of advice they come across, which is fine. People need to feel comfortable with who and what they're chasing. But when I meet people that don't follow me, that don't ultimately become clients or members, those are the people that intrigue me, and those are the people that I try to plant into them. Never give up. I don't care what you end up doing. I don't care where you end up. Just never give up. A friend of mine years ago, who knows my story, and him and I had a conversation, and he asked me, he said, how did you ever recover? How did you get, when you think about where I was, how did you get to where you are? How did that happen? And in relatively, short period of time, you're talking 20 years. I mean, I was in my late 20s, I'm early 50s now. You're talking, 15, 20 years. I had a drastic change in my behavior, in my emotion, mental state. I mean, almost, 180-degree turn there. And my friend, he said, how did you do this? And I thought for a while, and the only word that I can come up with was persistence. I didn't, even when I was lying on that couch, totally helpless, I knew there had to be something. So that's why I started walking outside. If it was one,
right.
I couldn't. So the message I always give to people, whether, wherever they are in their journey, wherever they end up, never give up. That is really the most important thing. There's always.
And nobody's going to come save you.
No.
Right? No.
You're absolutely correct. And one thing about anxiety disorders is we don't feel like we can do it. So we wait. I keep waiting for somebody, Superman to come flying out of the sky, or,
yeah,
some stardust to fall on me and, come save me. Doesn't happen outside of us. It happens from within. It's an analogy, and I see this all over social media, but if you break an egg from the outside, it destroys life. But if the egg breaks from the inside, it creates life.
Creates a life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Yeah, love that. I love that.
It comes from within. We grow. We are the miracle. We really are. It's hard to see at times. It really is. But it's if we don't give up, it can be a beautiful journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm really impressed,
so
Mr.
deep.
Valentine.
Yeah.
From laying on a couch to being the person you are today is hope. There's hope, people. Listen to this man.
Yeah.
Look at his website. That's what I did. He gave me hope.
Which will be in the description of this video. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. 2.5 years of a headache for him, but fortunately, the rest of us get to benefit. Boom.
Yeah. Yeah. A lifetime of hope.
Which is what, yeah.
2.5 years of labor, but a lifetime of hope. So.
Yeah. And you're a lot of the type of person that, when we started this podcast, it was just about authors and stuff like that. And then, we both thought, what? We want to make it about mental health because so many people suffer. It's just a world. It's a crisis. And when we can share with people stories like yours, recovery like yours, and places to send people, high five, guys.
High five.
Don't leave me hanging.
All right.
I did.
No, seriously. I am serious.
Yeah. No. Yeah. People suffer in so many ways. And, working up at the hospital for the years that I did. And unfortunately, the treatment center it no longer exists in its original form.
Oh.
Bought out another hospital system, and they've reconfigured it. It's an entirely different situation right now. Which
it probably went into the Xanax drive-through.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I have nothing against medication. If somebody is going to benefit from medication, by all means, at it. The problem with that is that medication does not create recovery. It helps symptoms for now, but if we only rely on the medication, when you come off the medication, the anxiety disorders are still there. Nothing's really changed. So I tell people who are on medication, wonderful. Use this time while you feel a little bit less anxiety, or if you feel a little better, use this time to engage your anxiety, to engage the process of recovery. The program that I teach was originally started in 1971. It was a doctor, Dr. Zane was his name, and he did not have anxiety disorders, but he was fascinated with fear. And his story, to me, was fascinating, and that's why I just want to share that as well. I never met him, but I met many of his original clients from back in 1971 who ended up going on to become counselors and then ended up being my mentors in the process. So that I feel like the wealth of knowledge that I got from these counselors was amazing. But Dr. Zane was fascinated with fear. And the premise of the entire program that I teach and that I was taught originally, that I'm certified in, that I ran in my workshops and in support groups, to what I do now on my website, Dr. Zane, it all stemmed from an experience he had. He was in a rehabilitation. Somebody had surgery. I don't know if it was hip surgery, knee surgery, and he was watching this woman walk across the floor, and she was going very, very slowly. She was, learning how to walk again. And at some point, she stopped, and she physically had fear. And went up to her afterwards and said, "Why did you have fear?" And she said, "Well, what if I couldn't do it?" And Doctor, but you were doing it. Like, why couldn't do it? I said, well, what if I couldn't? Those two words, what if, is the basis of all anxiety, from an anxious thought up to a full-blown panic attack. It all starts with the what if. Anxiety is always in the future. It's a futuristic what if thought. What if I'm in a situation that's what anxiety is. So Dr. Zane literally created this program around this one woman's response, what if? And and to me, that's fascinating. So since 1971 till the present day, which is what now, 50 years? So we're 50 years into this, and the treatment center that I worked at boasted a 97% success rate for every member that came through those doors.
Wow. Oh, my.
And there is no other program that I know of that can even close to a 97% success rate.
Right.
I mean,
can't imagine.
This is without medication. This is purely behavior modification. And I mean, listen, I'm living proof of it myself, and the clients that I've worked with for years, I've seen tremendous results. There was a gentleman that was in a helicopter crash during Vietnam. And for 40 years up to that point, he had suffered with anxiety disorders, PTSD, he was on medication. He suffered 40 years. The group that I was running, the workshop, which is currently, when I went through it, it was a 9-week. When I ran them, they were 8 weeks.
Come on, people.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Fast track. There's no need for 9 weeks.
No. No coffee breaks here.
But he, not only did he take a train to Grand Central Station in Manhattan by himself, He also bought a plane ticket for the first time to travel to children. The remarkable success that he had in 8 short weeks after literally a lifetime of suffering. A lifetime of doctors telling the family there's nothing we could do for him. He is who he is. Accept this. The family would not accept it. The family kept fighting for this man. And to watch him go from, in 8 short weeks, where he came in and where he left, it blew my mind. It to me is such an inspiration. I still get excited today talking about this because it's success stories that encourage me that I want to find those people that are suffering that badly, and I want them to and I want them to enjoy life. And that's what this man was able to do in those 8 weeks, is start to enjoy life again.
Aww.
And
That's awesome.
Beautiful to be part of that. It's inspiring. It's inspiring to me.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
So back to
Well, I'd like to do something and thank you on behalf of a lot of people that you have helped that I know. And, you helped me. There's a lot more people out there, and let's send them your way.
Yeah.
So
you tell us, the website is obviously anxietypat.com, which we will be linking it. But can you tell us all the other social media handles where people can find you and what you're offering, because they need to come to you as ASAP?
Well, the one social media that I use regularly is Twitter, and the handle is @anxietypath. And I use that, when people want to reach out to me, but they're not sure who I am. They're a little hesitant. Send me a message. I'm more than happy to start there. Also, my email is mike@anxietypath.com. Mike is Mike. And, people send me emails. Twitter's the way to go. And I'm here. I try to make myself available on Twitter as much as possible. And I also do live streaming when my laptop works. I haven't done it the last couple of weeks, so I have. But I like to live stream on YouTube on Wednesday nights. Certainly they're in the library there. People can go back and see past episodes. And once my laptop gets up and running, hopefully next week, I'll get back to doing that. But I always make myself available to people. So anybody who wants to talk, that have questions, the website, there is a small fee to join as a member, which is $14.99 a month. It's a very small fee. And
it's worth it. It's worth it. It is.
That is to separate and try to keep it a private community. I don't want just somebody just bouncing in there. And, I want people that are committed to the program to join. But yes, direct message through Twitter, email mike@anxietypath.com. I'm available.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for coming on and telling your story, because it's extremely inspiring.
Thank you, everyone, for watching, and thank you once again to Michael for joining us today. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at all the links listed in the description. And don't forget to hit like on this video and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. And if you want to show us a little extra love, we also have a link for donations. Thank you, everyone, once again, and we will see you right here next week at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Have a good day.